All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Unity Hour. We are so excited to have everybody back this Friday. We had tremendous feedback last Friday from our first session for making space for happiness. And coming out of that session, we got a lot of feedback from the community that you guys wanted to really dig into career searching during this very interesting time we're in right now. So today we are super excited to have the session anchored in Ask an Expert Career Search Edition. So today we have two amazing members of the Mom Project team. They're some of the originals around here. They've been with the Mom Project since the very beginning, Megan Riley and Laura Nash. And both of them are dedicated to kind of helping our talent get connected to the best possible role for them, advocating for flexibility, and just really helping people unlock kind of the best path for them moving forward. So for today's session, it's going to be entirely driven by questions that were submitted by you all, the community, which is really great. And there were a lot of questions. We were seeing a lot of the questions over and over, a lot of the same questions over and over again. And so we bucket them into a few themes, but we think, over the course of the next hour, sorry, we started a few minutes late, we will really be able to answer a lot of your top questions and concerns at the current time. And just so you know, if you're logged in, watching from the YouTube stream, you can add in additional questions in the chat in real time, and we're moderating that as we go along. So we will try to populate some of those questions into this conversation as well. Laura, Megan, I don't know if you just want to quickly introduce yourself, and then we can kind of get into it and start answering some questions.
Sure, I'll go first. Hi guys, it's great to be here. My name is Laura Nash. I've been with the project going on 2 years. Super passionate about what we do and you, our community. So very excited to have this opportunity to share with you guys and support you however we can.
And I'm Megan Riley, and I've also been with the Mom Project for 2 years. Echo the same sentiments as Laura. Super excited to be here and answering some of your questions and continuing the Mom Project mission.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, so I guess we're gonna just kind of get into it. One of the most commonly asked questions we saw was, are companies still hiring? Are they moving candidates forward in the interview process or posting new roles? And should I keep my job search moving, or should I put it on hold right now?
Yeah, so great question. Definitely keep your job search moving. Don't stop. Companies are still hiring. They're moving forward in the interview process, and they're even doing virtual onboarding. So there are companies that are continuing in the process, albeit getting a little more creative with how they do that. And in terms of job search, yes, maybe it will slow down a little bit right now, but that makes it a great time to network, keep looking at roles with a fresh perspective in this new normal, and just kind of keep at it, albeit maybe at a little bit slower of a pace.
Awesome. And building off of that, actually, I saw this one kind of come in real time today, but from people who might have been in active conversations with a recruiter or someone on, a hiring team, and then all of a sudden their hiring got frozen. What would you recommend they do if they want to kind of stay top of mind or pick things up when things settle down a little bit in a month or?
Yeah, I think shooting that contact and email every now and then, just with a caveat of, I understand things are a little crazy and things are changing every day, even, just kind of that touch point consistently, but not overly consistently, just to stay top of mind with that hiring manager, that person you were in contact with, is totally appropriate during this time.
Great. And kind of building on that, if you can't put your career search on hold right now, how can someone make their application stand out, especially at a time when there is likely a flood of other qualified candidates?
Yes, this is Laura. I'll jump in. We're just going to tag team here. So my my first thought here is to really be very thoughtful in your search. If you haven't already, I mean, this is a time to really, again, think about what you're for, really take an honest look at your skill set, your background, and what your fit is for. And again, be very purposeful. So that also means when there is a position that's open and hiring for, is to really look at the requirements of the job, make sure that your resume and your cover letter are aligning with those requirements. You need to make it very clear how you're aligned and match for that position now more than ever. Other things you can do, make sure your resume is clean. And when I say clean, again, it's like grammar, spelling. I always recommend, I'm sure you have, spell check on your either Google Docs or Word, but I would have 2 or 3 other people look at your resume. It's just one of the things as a recruiter, I mean, that you just notice off the bat, and it's really honestly hard to overcome sometimes. So I'd say those things you can do. Again, and then just specifically, again, making sure that you really make it clear how you align to a particular position is really important. The one other thing I did want to mention on your resume, so along with grammar, make sure too that your email address is not like one you created in 4th grade or one that your friends and family think is clever. Again, those are things you just don't really think about, but really think about an employer in a professional setting who doesn't know you yet, right? So those are all things, again, that I think can really help you shine at this time.
Awesome. Great tips. Shifting gears a little bit, what companies and industries do you see hiring right now? And what companies and industries do you foresee hiring again quickly once things are a bit more normalized?
Yeah. So we have seen a lot of tech companies still hiring. Consumer packaged goods companies are still hiring. I think generally speaking, contract work is still there. Companies still need to cover leaves. I'm not an expert on the economy or certainly what will happen, and everything changes day by day, as we all know. The hope is that we're going to kind of pick up where we left off, right? When we kind of get through this phase and we will just pick back up again. No one can predict it, but there are different tools you can use to see what companies are hiring. I just saw a listing on LinkedIn the other day of top 50 companies that are still hiring in this market. So, take the time to take a look at some of those. LinkedIn is a great tool. I think we're going to talk about it a couple different times, obviously our platform. But, definitely take this time to stay current and look at some of those industries that might, not be as affected during this difficult time.
Great. This is an interesting one. All of a sudden, the vast majority of us are now working from home, if we can. Are we seeing more remote or virtual roles becoming available as a result of the current environment?
I think it's just too early to tell. But I think that the really great thing is that this is an unprecedented time for remote work, right? Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's sharing best tips and practices around remote work, which, my hope is it will just kind of take away some of the fears maybe more traditional workplaces have had around remote, kind of lift that veil that people can be productive, very productive actually working remote. And just imagine if we actually had childcare, right? Like we're working remote with kids and spouses at home. So yeah, I would expect to see at least some more flexibility coming out of this, definitely opening up conversations. And yeah, I feel positive about it, but just a little too early to see, to tell exactly, what the effect will be.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see kind of the long-term effects of all of this in terms of remote work. Remote, but yes, I would much rather if my 3-year-old wasn't here with me. So the next question kind of is based off the one we just asked, but how can I market myself as a solid candidate for a fully remote role, particularly if I have little or no remote work experience? Other than the Mom Project, are there any other places or creative ways we can go about seeking remote or virtual roles?
Yeah, this is a great question. Laura talked about this a little bit in the last question. This is kind of a great experiment, right, for all of us now, whether you're currently working remotely or, most of the country is in general. So to take what we're learning now and kind of market that for the future, however you're balancing your home, your children, also highlight, moving forward, if you're looking for remote or virtual roles, kind of that you're ready, right? That you have the tools, in terms of physical tools, computer, phone, all the things, right? Home office, a place to work. Those are some things you can kind of highlight. But we're kind of really in, again, the middle of this great experiment of so many people working remote and virtually. So taking what you learn and highlighting that in your resume moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, I think we're all learning a lot. Seeing if virtual or remote work is, working from home every day is even something you want to do. Obviously, a lot of people are interested in that, but yeah, it is certainly a great experiment we're in right now. Okay, next question. Can you share any insights or pro tips around jumping into freelance or project-based work, particularly as I have been recently laid off? So yeah, this question was asked quite a bit for people who might be thinking about jumping into the freelance world or project-based world for their first time in their career. So interested.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I get that a lot because a lot of us have, been really used to very traditional permanent roles. And so this whole freelance and project-based work is kind of different. And I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it kind of explained this way, but one thing I look at it is like a permanent role is kind of like getting married, right? It's a marriage. There's a lot of thought. There's a lot of process that goes into it, right? Before you make that ultimate decision. And project-based work is kind of like dating, right? Like you have to just go into it with a different mindset. Like really, I always encourage people to have an open mind. It is a wonderful opportunity to try out maybe industries you had not considered in the past. It doesn't have to be, again, you have to think of it as this could be a short-term great experience to add to your resume. So I always say, number one, go in with a very open mind. And in particular, depending on the type of freelance or project-based work, it could be very specific around, again, a certain project. So it's more important than ever to understand what the deliverables are of that project, really tailor your experience and explain specifically how you will be able to help and deliver upon this, what project-based experience, right? So it's very important to be specific. If it's a position where you're filling maybe a leave or someone's going out on a parental leave, again, just really plugging in on how you can add value at a very specific point in time and around specific critical skills. And also highlighting, again, how you can jump into a new environment, again, a new culture, et cetera, and just kind of be able to pivot quickly. So again, I think open mind is one of the biggest things, and look at it as a great experience to try out a company and for them to learn more about you to see if there's maybe even there could be a potential long fit or long-term.
That's awesome. Can I add something, Katie?
Yeah.
From my own personal experience, having had very long-term full-time employment and then finding myself in an active job search, doing some project-based work and some contract work allowed me to really refresh my network as well, because I ultimately then all of a sudden have this huge Rolodex opened up to me because I was working with a bunch of people and had really shared experience with them, which can lead to the next thing, even if it's not at that company or it's not, a temp to perm type of situation. You're ultimately showing your value through your work, and then you're able to get more opportunities as a result. And I think that can't really be understated, even for shorter projects that might be, freelance 4 to 6 weeks. You then have someone in your network that can really recommend you and kind of get you to the next thing as well.
That's great. For those who maybe don't want to jump into freelance or project-based work right now, but maybe have a little time, is now a good time to take online courses to freshen up or learn new skills? Are these types of programs valuable, even if there is no formal accreditation or certificate offered once complete?
Yes, yes, all of it. Now is a great time for that. Even if there isn't a certification or oh my gosh, accreditation. Thank you. It's Friday. You can detail it on your resume. It becomes, you're constantly educating yourself, right? So obviously, free programs are better. There are some that obviously there are fees. So the cost analysis of that is personal, but anything you can do to kind of add to your skills and resume it's absolutely a great time for that.
Awesome. What are some strategies for job searching outside of job sites and boards?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of opportunities. I mean, not all companies use the large job boards out there. So I think number one, you have to make sure you've got a LinkedIn profile that's professional and all of those things, but your network is going to be huge. So really, again, spend time to research your network, ask questions, identify if you know the position that you want to be in, look at other people that are, on LinkedIn, look at other people that are in the same industry, that are maybe in the same job title. And you can network on LinkedIn and like message people, but you have to approach it with learning. So like, if you want to network with someone maybe you don't know and they're in a position or industry that you're interested in, there's nothing wrong with sending a message that's very much geared towards that person. Like I've been out of the workforce, looking to get back in. I'd love to know more about your position. I mean, it has to be all about the other person in a genuine way to really learn. Again, I guess I would just take it from a learning perspective. And that's a good way people want to help people. And I think especially right now would be a great time. I know we're all busy, but I think we're just at this point where people want to help people. So I think using your network, referrals are a huge way. I mean, I can't underestimate referrals too. So past coworkers, I mean, just again, have a lot of conversations, be very open to learning about other people. And then research companies that you're interested in, again, that aren't on the big job boards. Every company has a career section, no matter what size organization it is. So even, small companies don't have budgets for huge, Indeed, campaigns. So again, do research on companies and go directly to their websites.
Awesome. Yeah. And we can't emphasize enough the power of networking and really thoughtful ways.
I think we've also seen, I've gotten some questions from the community over the past few weeks of like, how do you network in isolation, right? And I mean, and I kind of laugh because I'm like, I don't even remember the last time I've been to a networking event since I've had kids, right? Because you're like, oh, am I really going to be going out at 7 for like a mixer to like go to not as much, right? Since I've had kids. And so I do think we have this time, and I'm not to say that we all have extra time. That is absolutely not the case. But as you're thinking about networking from home, really, I think leaning into LinkedIn can be a really powerful tool. It is one of these ways that even just by joining an hour like this, I can like see the live chat, and it's so encouraging because you're really making new connections that you maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity for. And so I think what we're seeing out in the market is this overwhelming response to allow people ways to connect virtually. And so really jumping on that and trying to connect with as many people that can help you in your job search is the time is now, right? Like we've got some time where the world is stabilizing, and we can kind of make some of those connections that also help us personally feel like we're making progress. So I think there's some really good ways to do that as well. So we'll also take that as a follow-up, networking with social distancing. I think that's
a good one.
So the next question came up quite a bit, given current circumstances for a lot of us. If you have been furloughed, should you indicate that on your resume?
I don't think it's necessary. I spoke to a candidate, I think it was earlier this week, and it was not on her resume. I think it's important to mention it in a live conversation. If you're having a live conversation, it's kind of a personal choice. You don't need to put it on there if you want to put it on there. Certainly, there are a lot of people in that position right now, but it's you don't need to indicate it. But if you are having a live conversation, it's definitely something you should bring up. Just in the idea of transparency, of course.
So now shifting gears, this kind of next section of questions is a little more just like broadly kind of career search questions, applying and interviewing for roles. A lot of us are still going at it very hard right now, as you should be. And yeah, so hopefully this next little line of questions will be helpful. So to kick it off, what is the acceptable number of pages to have in my resume? Do you have any specific resources you recommend to those of us looking to create a solid resume?
Yeah, so I will say, I think, depending on your experience level, 1 to 2. I mean, really, 2 pages. I would not go past 2 pages. It's just, I know, and I know the feeling, you're like, I have so much great experience. I have all these things I want to share. It's important to remember this is a summary of, like, you've got to just hit it like with the biggest highlights, etc., because you'll have all the time to get to an interview to explain more, use a cover letter. So 2 pages max for me is what I always recommend. Oh, and then in terms of tools, I think I was going to I don't know, our community, do you guys want to kick off a little bit more about what's coming from the Mom Project?
So sneak peek for those listening, we will have a beta version ready next week of our new product called Resume Rev. You'll be receiving all the details, but this basically allows you to use your Mom Project profile experience to create a really clean version of your resume that you're able to use for not only applying for jobs through the Mom Project, but you're able to PDF and use anywhere that you're applying for jobs. And really the goal for that was we want to equip you with the right tools to be successful. And a resume, as you can see with all these questions, is a great place to start because it really means being able to articulate your story onto a piece of paper or two. And that's a really hard thing to get right and to feel good about. And so we will have a special resume session after that rolls out. So look for that in the next couple of weeks as well.
Yes, very excited to get that out in the world. All right, so next question. How do recruiters screen resumes? Anything we should know about ATS systems?
So speaking for myself, I typically will look through resumes, skimming first at titles, companies, making sure that the titles and industries are matching the job that I'm looking for. And then I go back and look at those that best matched up from that perspective, go through those particular resumes in more detail to search for, specific successes that somebody has detailed. If it's, increased sales, worked on a certain level of budget, those specific details are really important to include. Obviously, big successes, landed a huge account, those types of things are things that I really look for. If there's a certain tool that a job is requiring, I'm definitely looking for those keywords. ATS systems are a little bit of a different ballgame, but they generally operate in somewhat of a similar manner, right? They're using keywords. If someone's searching an ATS, they're using keyword searches, probably in the same manner. And keep in mind with, a recruiter, a human looking at resumes as well as an ATS, we're looking for something specific that might not be totally emphasized in a job description. So, for instance, I was working on a role that was requiring a certain marketing automation tool. And that was the one thing I looked for first and foremost when I was skimming through resumes. And so I can't emphasize enough, like those keywords, tools, titles, companies, are really important to highlight, because those are the things we're looking for. And those are the things that we know that client or company must have in order to consider you for a role. So definitely, make sure that your resume is configured to meet the minimum kind of requirements for a specific role if you're talking about, applying to roles. Is that helpful?
Yes, very much. And I think it's reassuring to hear that like there are real people on the receiving end, reviewing these things. I think
100%.
a lot of people forget that people are still in there. It's not all just like an algorithm and a program. So yeah, that's great.
100%.
So next question is more specific to applying to jobs through the Mom Project Marketplace and our platform. Any tips on how to get my application to a role via the Mom Project Marketplace to stand out? How can I best use the Why Me section in my applications with the Mom Project?
Yeah, I think the Why Me section is critical. It's a great place to really maybe do a little summary or sales pitch about your background. My biggest suggestion would be to customize it for a particular position that you're applying for through the Mom Project. So if you filled it out in the past, just make sure it's still relevant to the new role that you are really looking to get an interview for. And also focus on what you've done, not like what you think you'd be good at. Again, it's just keep it really simple, concise, why it's a great fit for the particular position. I think that's helpful. And then also, it's really not a time to be like overly creative, right? I mean, I think there's time and place, right? I think it's important to just keep it professional and again, focus on the specific role at hand and highlight some concrete ways or concrete things that make you a fit for the role.
Yeah, that's great insight because that's, something I think you guys look at first and foremost when you're starting to scan a bit on.
Yeah. I'll say I read that. That's the first thing I read. Right. I mean, I really love it. I mean, we get a lot of, it's great. Cause our resume is set up a certain way, but this is more conversational. So it's almost like, it's like us hearing your voice. So I mean, really don't overlook that aspect. I read it it's one of the first things I do. So.
Yep.
That's awesome. Good insight there. So given that in-person meetings are not happening at the current time, there were a lot of questions about any tips for nailing a phone interview or video interview. Particularly, I feel like video is kind of a new world for a lot of people, but yeah, any tips you have for phone or video interviews?
Yeah, I thought about this in sort of like our pre-state and then had to swing back to like our current state and how to kind of answer this. We all are in the same boat. So I think current state, everyone understands that there's little people, big people, dogs, noises in the background, right? So don't let that get you discouraged or feel nervous when that happens because everybody's in the same boat. Do your best to find a quiet place. Do your best to get the littles out of the house, the partners out of the house. Do your best, but understand that everybody's in the same boat. As far as video conferences go, again, doing your best to find a quiet, kind of clean place. In terms of background, yesterday I was on a call and had an Elsa castle in the background. That was not maybe the best choice. Good thing was it was internal. And also, I always err on the side of, again, being sort of transparent in your situation, right? Even pre-current state, if you've got a little one around, it's okay to say, I have a little bit of an unforeseen circumstance. This isn't happening at an ideal time. So I apologize in advance for any interruption I may have, right? I think we're all humans and all have our stuff going on and we're all just trying to do our best. So even in pre-state, it's okay if you find yourself in an unforeseen circumstance to be upfront right away and go from there. And again, one more on the video conference. I wouldn't take the video call from your bed or from a couch.
Yes, that's
just
a good
throw
one.
that in there.
Yes, that's a good one. Yep, I won't tell that story, but it was back in the day. Back in the day before the rules were written.
Yeah.
I will also say, like, having been a remote worker for a very long time, finding good lighting. Not
You do have really good lighting.
I'm lucking out with this weather
You
today,
are.
but also I think people tend to be distracted by looking at themselves while they're talking. It would literally be like if you were in a meeting and you had a mirror up, like it's a really awkward thing because you're distracted by what you look like. So ultimately getting your meeting set up and then hiding your own view, right? Like
Yes.
knowing that what you look like, hiding your own view and making eye contact with the person that you're talking to as if you were in a real meeting will allow your communication to be much smoother, much clearer. You won't be like looking down at the side, like looking at yourself talking is like a really awkward thing to do. It's like listening to yourself on the radio. No thanks.
Yes.
And so that's my top tip. When people do that, they start to like feel more of themselves, like allow themselves to feel a little bit better. And then also just testing your mic and your video before the call
Yes.
starts. There's like, as we've all experienced over these last couple of weeks, there's a million call technology things. So just getting on a few minutes early can be helpful, and you can troubleshoot before you're like face to face with someone that you're trying to impress.
Absolutely.
Great tips. Love them all. Next question is something I think that's particularly important to our community. How can I ask for flexibility with confidence? Any specific terms I should be using? And is it bad to ask about work-life balance during an interview?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the interview question. In any first interview, whether that be the first interview with a company or the first time you're ever interviewing with an individual, I would never suggest openly asking what is the work like, asking that direct question. You really in those first interviews need to be very focused on the job itself, your qualifications, why you're a great fit for the job. Unfortunately, people still get kind of a little bit of an impression if that's one of your top questions that um, that's most, I mean, even though it's very important to us, right, especially as moms and women, there's a time and place for it. There's a lot of things you can do for companies to understand maybe what their flexibility factors are before. The great thing coming through the Mom Project, little Mom Project plug, is we do that, right? Like we have those conversations with you. We know it's not even one you have to talk about, right? When you work with us. I think that's why so many people love coming through us. But I think broadly, you can research companies and get information about them prior about maybe their flexibility. I still have found though that I think a lot of times, even within an organization, even if they have a specific policy, it really can come down to whoever your direct manager will be. I think teams tend to still. You can ask, however, like in an interview question, more about culture. So, like, what are the team expectations? How does the team typically work today? Like, you can ask questions that will most likely get you to the answer you're looking for in those first interviews. So I think that's helpful because it is a very important factor that you need to know before you were to accept a new position. And then if you were, once you're established in a position and you're producing properly, I think if you want to, come to your manager and approach your manager with some needs for flexibility, do so with a game plan. So I wouldn't suggest just coming in saying, I need to start at 10 o'clock. Is that 10 o'clock in the morning? Is that okay? Really come in with like, here's a plan. Although I, would need to maybe pick up my child at 10 o'clock, I have the ability on it's early in the morning, get work done from this time to this time, maybe make up the time at a later date. I would just really encourage you to be thoughtful and come to your manager with a game plan of how you're still going to be very productive and get everything done that needs to to be accomplished.
Yeah, that's great advice. We always say, like, kind of building off of that, not only a game plan, but even sometimes positioning it as like, can we try a test for a month or two?
Yeah.
The
The trial can be really powerful, right? Because I think oftentimes we're trying to overcome the objection and fear from our managers or a company that may be more traditional. And if you can get out in front of that and not make it feel like a forever
Yeah.
task, even like, and allow you to prove yourself, like that can be a really empowering thing for the relationship with your manager as well, where they don't feel like they have to like, oh, if I do it for you, I have to do it for everyone. It's like, well, it's just a trial. Let's see how this goes. You then get to prove yourself out. I think also too, and I know the world has become tipped upside down in the last couple of weeks, but oftentimes when managers or companies hear flexibility, it just means remote. And that's not always true. There's a lot of different kinds of flexibility that may be really important to you. So one of them for me is that I don't like to commute over 30 minutes. And if I have to sit in my car longer than that, I go a little crazy. But if it's under 30 minutes, I'm fine with it. Right. And so for me, that's just a hard stop. For others, it might be the amount of travel. It might be, your ability to work from home. Like so really getting clear on the inventory of like, what does flexibility actually mean to you? Like, what do you really need? Like, what do you need? It's a must have. What's a nice to have for you to really feel like you can thrive? And then you can communicate that articulately, because oftentimes we go in and we're already trying to like supersede the objection. So we're almost already defensive, as opposed to giving the manager the benefit of the doubt that they want you to be as productive as possible and as happy as possible. And so if you can stay like what we always say is above the line. So you're open, you're curious, you want to help them solve the problem. All they really care about is are you going to be happy and is the work going to get done? And if you can answer those questions and set up a framework that supports that, I think that can be a really great way to have that conversation.
Awesome. Next question is one that I think causes a lot of people to kind of freeze up in the interview process, but any pro tips for answering the question, tell me about yourself?
The worst question ever. It's the worst question ever. I think that first is to anticipate that someone somewhere along the interview process will ask you this question. They'll sit back in their chair, and they will ask you the question. And so be prepared for it. I think be prepared with, kind of a couple of sentences. Don't start running through your background like for 20 minutes. A couple of high level sentences about what makes you, what your career has been about, and then kind of throw it back on the interviewer, and just say, is there something specific that you'd like me to talk about? Or you could even scrap the initial, I am marketing executive with 17 years, right? And you could just say, what would you like me to focus on first? I think always being brief in that question is the way to go. And then again, putting it back on the interviewer. A lot of times that interviewer wants you to, just start somewhere, but they're looking for something specific in the end. So be prepared for the question with a brief summary, and then put it back on the interviewer to ask you a more specific question.
That's great. Just being prepared for that, I think. And, I think that goes back a little bit when we kind of touched on like the why me section. Exactly. And when you're bidding on the project, just like having your elevator pitch down it'll help you, whether you're networking, whether you're interviewing, whatever it may be. So yeah, it's a good thing to just. Great. We're going to kind of shift gears and move to a next kind of focus section. We got obviously a lot of questions about returning to work and navigating career pivots. So the first question in this section is, I have a significant career break on my resume. How can I be taken seriously as a candidate? If I have a break of 2, 5, 15, or even 20 years, what sorts of things should I think about as I craft my resume and cover letter?
Yeah, I think about, always consider, what you've been doing in the interim, right? I think it's always relative. A lot of folks, you don't think about it, but things you're doing, you may not be earning a paycheck for, but again, any of the, volunteer experience, any of, anything that you're involved in, I think it's very appropriate to include that. I think people, and I hope is that I think it's more and more common to see this these days. So I always encourage people I don't feel like there's a taboo like there used to be. Of course, that's our mission, right? To help, protect that. But I think it's okay to put, to not over address it, I guess. You don't have to in your cover letter, go into a long story about, why you took time off. I think again, it's going back to the job description, like what your experience have been, no matter how long ago they were, they're relative to this new position, staying focused on that and maybe adding the experience that you have gained during maybe your time away from paid work is helpful as well.
That's great. And I think something we always say is like, own your break, own your pause, like less is more, just
Yes.
it's there.
I feel strongly on that. And that's the guidance that we give, is that often the authority to articulate your own story in a way that feels empowering to you will give you the confidence to speak about it and then move to the next topic. Right. And so don't overcompensate. Like you don't need to apologize. There is nothing that needs to come out about, oh, I know I've been off for a long time. Like, you know what? I took 3 or 4 years off, whatever it is. I really valued my time taking care of my family. I'm super excited to get back into whatever my career is. I would love to talk about the opportunity and how you think, I could drive the most value for you.
Yeah.
And then you've just like covered it and moved on, as opposed to like getting stuck in a place where you're feeling not confident about it. And so getting really confident about articulating the pause and like, there's power in the pause. And it's really hard. I'm not undervaluing how hard it is to jump back into the paid workforce. But we are finding that candidates are having a lot of success by really owning the story and being confident in that, and then pushing it back into the conversation that you want to be in.
Love it.
That's great. And just building off that, and Laura, you touched on it a little bit, but should I include, or like, I guess maybe what's the best way to include volunteer or pro bono work on my resume?
Yes, absolutely. And Laura did touch on this, and absolutely you should. And I think, depending on, especially if it could be relevant to the job that you are exploring, definitely put it in with more detail. I've seen a ton of resumes with a lot of volunteer work, with just really meaty roles that they detailed. And it was really helpful and relevant. So don't be afraid to add it. And, depending on what your experience is or what your resume looks like, going back to that resume builder tool at some point, we can figure out where to put it, but absolutely include it because it's relevant, and own it. I loved how you said that, Colleen. Own it. It's important. It's what makes you you, and it's experience.
Yeah. I'll add one thing there. Because Colleen, that really resonated with me, like owning your break. Because I remember when I was coming back, I felt this pressure. I'm like, oh my God, I did not volunteer that much. I was like, I didn't think that through. So also don't think you have to fluff something up. Like, I didn't have time to volunteer.
That's so right.
If I could do
the fact too is that Laura and Megan were both returned to work.
Yes.
And which gives them a really powerful viewpoint on, working with candidates and hiring managers to help them understand this great, kind of somewhat overlooked talent pool that, and I know I've seen it in the chat too, where everyone's like, oh, it was already hard. Now the economy has taken a dive. Yeah. Is it going to be harder? And I think it's really networking to the advocates like the Mom Project and, some other sites out there as well that allow you to bypass the bias, right?
Yeah.
And that ultimately you are still very skilled, really valuable assets to a company, and it's getting into the conversations that allow you to have the conversations you want to have, right? And I think the job market will be hard, for this foreseeable future, but ultimately, like, you as an individual, can shine through. I think that still is an important, empowering piece of what we each have. So
great.
Absolutely. So, okay, the next question. As someone who is currently a full-time caregiver, how can I still grow my professional network?
So we talked about this a little bit earlier, making sure you have a LinkedIn profile, joining alumni associations, staying connected to prior managers, coworkers, even, that you had from your previous experience, personal friends. If you are looking to make a career change, kind of research and talk to people in the field. Just look for opportunities to take online classes. So, there are still opportunities out there, and it's work, but now is the time, right? And I think those are all different ways that you could kind of build your network.
Yeah, I love those ideas. And something that's just been so interesting, I think, when we're in the position of like, I don't know how to network, or I need something, like I need a connection to get a job, or I need a job, like we're in a bit of that mindset of like, I need things from people, but ultimately we all have a lot to give, right? So you as a person, even if you're in an active job search, can make connections for other people. And so often as you're thinking about how do I network, or how do I refresh some conversations I need or have, think about what you have to offer. I mean, you have a lot to offer. There's a
Yep.
ton of value in just putting the good things into the world that you have, and then seeing how that works. Like even in the chat we were looking at, there was some recommendations around like, well, how do I get more LinkedIn endorsements? Like my best advice for getting LinkedIn endorsements is giving them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So like
Yeah.
the more you give, the more you will get back. And I know it seems hard to fathom, because when we're in a state of need, it feels hard to give, right? But ultimately that will get you further, and you're kind of infusing, I'm not woo woo, but karma into the network that you're trying to build. And I think that can be really an incredible resource. I know I mentioned it in the chat too, but just so the rest of the group, we are going to be launching a program in a couple of weeks that allows the community to really serve each other as with interview prep and job search support, and really allowing people to kind of really own what they are able to give, and really provide support to people that need it as well. So we're hoping to kind of frame up ways that people can do that as well.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. Lots of exciting stuff coming. Any special advice for those of us trying to return to the workforce after a 20-year career break?
Yeah, I just want to go back to something that Colleen said that I had to write down while we were chatting, the power in the pause. I think, Laura, I think you can relate to this too. I had a pause, a pretty lengthy one as well, and it's scary. And you feel a little, self-conscious. And so really owning that pause is a start, and realizing that you have a lot, bringing to the table. But also having patience, being persistent, being flexible, be open to new opportunities, different types of, functions, industries. And again, getting back to that networking like crazy. Referrals are powerful tools. We talked about that. So I think, it's all the soft and fuzzy stuff in terms of the advice, but there is really, and this is why the Mom Project is so special. We are able to have these conversations with candidates that it's okay. And there is a lot of powerful stuff that's going on in the pauses that we're taking. And to just have the confidence that you can do it. And it just might take a little time, but you'll get there.
Thank you. That's great. And again, like your perspective and Laura's perspective is really important to this whole conversation too. So, okay. So kind of building off of that, is it best to attempt to re-enter the workforce back at the same level I left at, or do I have to start somewhere lower and work my way back up?
Yeah, I think ideally, yes, you want to jump back in right where you were before. That would be the goal. I think it depends on maybe how long your gap was. There's a lot of factors at play. I mean, I can speak from personal experience. It depends on what's most important to you at the time and what you can do. So I took a 9-year gap, which is incredibly, it's like you look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, 9 years. And I actually did go back pretty significantly, but I did because the position I accepted had health benefits, working part-time, and that was important to me. It had childcare built in. And what was amazing, I also was confident in myself that I went in, did a great job. Guess what? I was promoted within, 3 times in a couple of years and got leadership roles. So I also don't, you have to know yourself, and it depends on the position. If you were to take something lower, make sure it's an organization where there's room for growth, where would have that opportunity to get back, but also don't sell yourself short, right? You can come in at the same level. I think it just depends, but I would recommend just being open to it. Again, not selling yourself short, but for me, it was just an easier way to get back in. It was a great fit for me. And then, it took a little time, but I got back there.
Awesome. And we're going to do one last question before we wrap up. This one came up a lot, but, is someone looking to make a career pivot, maybe into a new industry or a new field, how can I make sure to highlight my skills as transferable to this kind of new industry I'm focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this a lot in the importance of networking. I think, the importance of upfront research, right? And how your skills are transferable. And again, having the conversations with people in the industry that you want to pivot to, or the kind of function you want to pivot to, making sure that you're asking just ask questions, gather information, do the research. And network will do you a lot of good in presenting yourself in a way that is appropriate for that next step. I can't emphasize like the research and the networking and the educating yourself. If that's what you want, then go for it. But you just have to do the upfront kind of learning to see where your skills align.
Awesome. Well, I know it's 1:00, so we have to wrap things up here. I want to thank Laura, Megan, Colleen, as always, for their time and energy. And, we will see you again next Friday for Unity Hour. We're working on a really great one, so stay tuned for more on that from us. We should have info out today or Monday. And then for anybody who wasn't able to join in real time, this video will be recorded. We'll send it out, and feel free to share it with your friends. And if you have any other specific questions, always feel free to email us at community@themomproject.com.
Thank you so much, Katie. And I know we had a ton of questions in the chat, and so I just wanted to call out that we documented all of those, and we will use those to inform either updating our FAQs, hosting another session, or getting you the guidance that you're looking for. So we know we didn't get to all of them that were in the chat. It would have been a couple other sessions, but we do want you to know we've heard them, and we'll take those and follow up as much as we can. So thank you guys so much. Hang in there. I know we were all quarantined for a little bit longer, but hopefully this brought a little joy on a Friday. And until then, take care. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.